Greetings, fellow Gothamites. BlueDragonFive here.
and Rohith Dharr.
And we're back. We're talking not the Batman, but something to kind of satiate our palates until the Batman gets its inevitable sequel, and that is The Penguin. Yeah, so the initial there have been a lot of talks of spin-off shows that are kind of taking place within the universe of Matt Reeves' Batman, and some of them, essentially all of them, have been kind of nixed. But the Penguin uh, was the first one in production. It was very much the first one that was definitely like guaranteed. Like, oh yeah, we're definitely doing this Penguin show, and now it's here, and we've seen it, and we're gonna we're gonna try going through the 8 episodes and tell you how we kind of giving you the essentially the week to week kind of take with hopefully a revolving panel of special guests or revolving panel ish. And of course, first up we have Rohit Dharr. So yeah, episode one, Rohit. What do you think overall?
Overall, I think it's a really great start to the series. I think that this episode really does well in terms of setting knowledge, the tone, and the overall narrative that we're going to follow week to week. There are some interesting ideas and themes that come through in terms of the writing, in terms of the acting choices made by the performers here. Um, in terms of the overall vibe, it's as close as you get to the Sopranos without it being the Sopranos, which is sort of a intentional point considering the fact that this Penguin is very much modeled after Tony Soprano, and the show is very much it being an HBO product. It has actors that have been in Sopranos and just other mobster related media, and in that respect, I think the show does a really great job of articulating a point about who Hawes is and what he will be. And I think that journey is going to be very interesting to see the ebbs and flows, especially with the players involved in the story.
Yeah. Yes, so I found episode one to be very impressive. It is apparently not. I can't. It doesn't sound like it was intentional from the outset, but it was kind of like in the finished product. It was kind of an inevitable comparison, but not a bad comparison or model to go off of. It is very much Sopranos meets the Penguin. Uh, and the end result's very cinematic. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I feel very much like this is a very successful way of doing like the whole like 8 hour movie in like 8 episodes kind of a vibe. Now again, we don't know what the runtime's going to be for all of these. All I heard is like the first couple episodes will be hour long, but whether that be the case or not, episode one very much feels like I got kind of part one of a movie here, or at least a very kind of an act one and a very massive story, which I'm very satisfied with. I mean, for years I've always wondered, like, if we ever saw, let me this way, if we ever like a way of approaching, Kingpin within the Daredevil series, like in another season, perhaps what might have been like a flashback structure of like how he climbed up the ranks of the Rigoletto crime organization. And I kind of feel through this we might be kind of getting that in a sense again, and seeing him kind of rise to be kind of like kind of like a kingpin of Gotham, so to speak, which Penguin does often do. And it feels like we're very much kind of doing this. Matt Reeves, one of the great things he's done with the Batman, kind of his take on things that he's been pulling from various sources of Batman, and he's been kind of remixing it with his own flavor. Again, like he's very much used like a grounded take, but doing kind of a different kind of like. I guess it's funny looking at all the dark permutations of Batman, where we keep grounded keeps being recontextualized. We're like gritty, grounded, and dark. Like Burton's more dark, and then we
Well,
have like, well, I'm saying we start there, and then we kind of redefine dark and gritty as the years go on with the other takes. Yeah,
it's I don't think it's necessarily a dark as being redefined. I just think there's just different flavors of dark, right? Because
yeah,
with Burn, it's dark in the sense of it being a gothic storytelling,
yeah,
because the films take a lot of inspiration from German expressionism, which was an influence for the Batman comics in the 40s. For Nolan, it's sort of taking this very high octane action thriller elements, um, big inspiration from things like Blade Runner, Heat, and mixing it to sort of being a modern day, crime drama. And this, it is sort of a crime drama, but it's more psychological, cerebral. It takes more of a direct inspiration from things like Seven, Zodiac, sort of the Fincher variety of darkness. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to, at least in my view, stand out from say the Nolan movies. The Nolan movies have sort of a more dark, operatic, epic. Nolan definitely, for example, the last movie, he takes inspiration from Lawrence of Arabia or just the grand epic storytelling of old Hollywood. Whereas for Matt Reeves, he takes inspiration from the more new Hollywood, things like The Godfather, things like um, Seven, just really Fincher's whole vibe and aesthetic as a director is very much a big influence for this version of Batman. And Sopranos is much more of a street level, just more down into the gutters. With Nolan, there's a little bit of a not cleanness to it, but there's just more of a streamlined, stylized way of doing great, like a crime level, like street level action, or characters have sort of have a larger life quality to them. Whereas for the Batman, especially the Penguin, the characters, the way they're drawn, they have much more of similarity to characters you see in like The Town or any recent crime drama.
I think maybe the way to look at it is, Nolan films have kind of the Hollywood polish on them, where this feels a little more gritty '70s filmmaking.
Yeah, it's much more like it's more in the lines of stuff that you see in like in like the Safdie brothers movie, or a Jeremy Saulnier movie, like guys that do grounded crime dramas that don't have sort of the yeah, like you said, the Hollywood polish or flair. I think these, like, Nolan is more epic and grand, whereas for Reese's material, both with the Penguin and the Batman, they're more intimate and quieter, if that makes sense.
It's like Nolan's like building a sophisticated Swiss watch, where we have Matt Reeves here. He's like he's polishing the gears, and he's like taking the old pieces and he's like putting them together in a way that's like it works very well. It's a well loved kind of piece of machinery, but it's like there's a
It's
lot more.
it's
There's a human touch to it.
it's analog
There
versus
you
more
go. It's very analog. Is the that's right. That's the better way of putting it. It's a very
yeah.
analog kind of.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I guess what I was getting at with all that is that basically, Reeves has pulled a lot of like kind of different kind of pieces of the Batman mythology, and he's kind of restructured it in a way. Like, for example, the Batman. There's a lot of there's an Earth One vibe, there's a Telltale Batman vibe, and then where he very much saw you like Batman Ego, which I mean, I think it is there, but I think maybe fundamentally he may have overblown like the ego thing in terms of like, we're using a lot of Batman ego in this. Like, kind of. It's there, but maybe not as much as he. The point being, we have a lot of these, and of course, the big one that bleeds into this show. There's a lot of Long Halloween and kind of the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale era of Batman within Dark Victory and Haunted Night, etc., etc.
Which makes a lot of sense
Yeah,
considering this is like, and this sort of, I don't know if you know this, Dragon, but I figured to share with the audience is that when Matt Reeves went to film school, I think Jeff Loeb was one of his teachers.
yes, and many people are not aware of this. Jeff Loeb, he got his start in like screenwriting and everything. He worked in the movies before he did comics.
Mm-hmm. Which is sort of an interesting pathway, because usually it's kind of the thing where comic book writers get into film, or if film people get into comics, it's really people that are noteworthy, like Damon Lindelof, Joss Whedon, Richard Donner, and Jeff Loeb didn't really have like a noteworthy filmography, so it's kind of just, he was just like a rung below the likes of say David S. Goyer, and just kind of went to comics, and from there, and now I think about it, with the fact that Long Halloween takes so much inspiration from The Godfather,
Mm-hmm.
and being sort of a film guy that
Oh yeah.
sort of his sensibilities.
And down the line, Jeff Loeb, he ends up greenlighting, at least having one of the voices in greenlighting, because he runs Marvel Television essentially, at least for a time he did, and he gave us the Netflix Daredevil, which of course huge for storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Yes, I guess what I'm saying here is like I like that we're kind of still doing that here with the Penguin, or we're very much we're kind of pulling from various kind of adaptations of the Penguin, but in kind of a fresh way, which kind of really adds a lot to the story sense. The point being, across the board, I'm not hearing really anyone saying like people at work are like randomly like like customers like, oh my god, did you see the Penguin yet? It's like, yes, I did. It was really good. There was a buzz, and it is warranted.
Yeah, I think part of it is that the Penguin is just if you just didn't have the Batman be acknowledged or whatever, it's a pretty well done crime drama. Of a mobster that's
Yeah.
going about and making
I mean,
crazy.
people are built in like the pre Breaking Bad, Sopranos, and The Wire. I suppose, but the Sopranos. I guess the point being, Sopranos was a huge draw, and especially the fact it's on HBO, I'm sure is helping as well. And just kind of a fate, kind of like the way that kind of works out.
Mhm.
Uh, and again, like a lot of things, we have to think about this. We have Penguin and we have Joker right now. We have two stories about iconic Batman foes that do not have Batman in the product.
But they work a lot better and are better received than the Sony Spider-Man projects that don't have Steve.
It's so weird how that works, isn't it?
I think part of it's just the Joker and Penguin are probably inherently more interesting characters
Yeah.
than the characters used by Sony. But I think part of it is just that the Joker and especially with Penguin,
Well,
they
Penguin
are
has the advantage of we at least established there is a Batman in his world, which again I think is really the key. And every time we do these things where we can't have Batman in the show, if we establish there is a Batman, but we're not seeing him, that just necessitates okay, maybe Batman is like a presence, but he doesn't need to be in the show. In the case of Joker, sequel notwithstanding, which we haven't seen yet, very much was like a one shot kind of deal. At least how that first movie works. So we didn't need a Batman for the story they were telling
well,
with that.
and it also helps that both Joker and Penguin are not trying to just take their villains and make them anti-heroes by any
Yeah.
stretch of
Which
they're
again, I've always argued those soon there's always a mistake when we keep doing the anti-hero route.
mhm. And also, I think another thing to the benefit, and maybe it's the criticism for the Joker, but I think also the Penguin is that these are projects that specifically aren't just we're doing the formula of a comic book or superhero project. Instead, the Joker, to the criticism of a lot of people, it's basically Taxi Driver meets a King comedy, and Joker, the sequel, it's a musical. And then for the Penguin, it's a like crime drama in the vein of The Sopranos.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think there is much more experimentation and creativity. Whereas for say the Sony Spider projects, not to belabor the point, they often are just formulaic 2000s era superhero movies, even though these movies have come out in the past 5 to 7 years. So I think for projects like Joker and Penguin, they succeed because they take the character and say, what is a milieu or setting that can take this character interesting places and not just, hey, we're doing X and Y and Z story. And here's like a bunch of Easter eggs or like near teases of the main hero. These are character story focused stories that take you on a journey that has a certain vibe, certain aesthetic, certain tone, and commits to the full stop. And I think the Penguin, especially in the first episode, does a really great job of making that commitment clear.
Yeah. So, okay, a few comments real quick just to kind of shout them out. Little Blue says in 3 days, Batman will have his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which yeah, a lot of people have been talking about that. That's it's good to see Batman get some recognition there. Of course, every time someone keeps bringing up the whole walk star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, I keep saying to him like, he already has a star, and that name is Adam West. He's already there.
And also it's like Batman needs recognition, like his I don't know 6 or 7 movies, critically acclaimed video games, critically acclaimed animated series,
Yeah.
comics. Like Batman, I think gets a little bit enough recognition from like the entire planet in popular
Yeah,
culture.
there you go. All right, real quick, Code Geass anime fan. In my opinion, Penguin's the only character in the Batman that was adapted well. So giving him a show was a good idea. Also, I'm a huge Penguin fan, probably preceding the first part of that. So I love him getting the spotlight. Penguin was apparently. I heard like Matt Reeves like talking on like the Insider podcast for the for the Penguin, and he mentioned that apparently when they did the Batman, Penguin tested through the roof. Like he was like the big audience favorite, even though he had like approximately 6 scenes in that movie.
Mhm.
All right, so I guess let's just start breaking it down, see where it takes us. So like setting wise, so we're 1 week after the end of the Batman, where Carmine Falcone. I'm going to keep saying Falcone, even though I always hate that we have to keep doing like left. You kind of we have Falcone or Falcone constantly in Batman media whenever we do Carmine. So in this case, so Carmine Falcone.
Just call him Carmine.
Yeah, Carme. So Carmine, he's dead. And there's now a power vacuum, of course, amongst the rebuilding since the seawall came down and basically flooded Gotham, which again is kind of we'll see how the Batman 2 kind of tackles this because we are kind of starting this with the Penguin. Again, this is kind of I kind of like here is that I love the idea that via 0 year we're kind of doing a no man's land, at least potentially. It seems like we're doing more 0 year than no man's land, but still, I like that we're kind of like blending the two in a sense here, and again in kind of a new way where their status quo has shifted. We're still facing some aftermath. Like the streets are kind of ripe for like a restructuring of power, and we go full again kind of lobe sale with the extended Falcone family.
Hmm.
So, yeah, we see the Penguin has a plan to move up the ranks, and this is the genius thing that I think is why I knew from the get go after this scene, like, okay, we are in really good shape here. Okay, this is a thing where I was already kind of sold on this. Cause I've seen this is a kind of a classic Penguin thing to do. He's gonna play it smart. He's gonna work up the, he's gonna work his way up the ladder. We have Alberto Falcone coming, who, by the way, our casting in this episode alone, our casting all across the board, all of our mobsters is spot on, and I loved everyone because we had Michael Zengel, I believe his name is. Yeah, Zengen, sorry, Michael Zengen, playing Alberto Falcone. I love him in the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel because he plays like a character I should hate, but he grows on you throughout that show, and I love him. So when I saw him, oh my God, they made him Alberto. That's great casting. And then we did what we did with him, which is a great misdirect of like, wow, we had this really good Alberto Falcone. And then he insults Oz, and he gets the axe. We kill off Alberto.
Hmm.
Which, to be fair, Alberto, he usually does not last long in these stories, but so I can't say like killing him off is like a complete at a left. It's not inaccurate to do with that character, but doing it like that soon, that was like, okay, we are in really good shape here. What do you think about the big surprise killing off Alberto?
I think it. I think it was not that I was surprised about that they did it when they did it or that Penguin did it. I think I was surprised about the aftermath, the initial aftermath. Like Penguin is just starts laughing, and he stops laughing and is like, "Oh," and realizes the gravity of the situation. And that I was surprised by because oftentimes I think in a typical conventional story, if Penguin did something like that, he starts like a low laugh and then goes into maniacal laugh, or it's just dead silent. And the way Oz reacted in this, it felt like such a human reaction,
Yep.
where you get like, oh, like you get a little bit of a
There's like
rise.
an instant catharsis, and then there's like, oh
Mhm.
God, what did I
Yeah.
do?
Hmm. And I think from there, it like sort of the mechanics of like, all right, he has to like get a body, he has to put a like black bag around him so that there's no blood or any
And
sort of
an
material on it.
interesting character is always on his heels when we first meet him. And look at Walter White. Like we see a character who like we're rooting for. He's in a very intenable position. The big hook of Breaking Bad is the first 3 episodes in which it's about a body disposal. So that's essentially what in a sense, that's kind of what we're doing here.
Hmm.
So also, I want to mention too. I love what precedes the killing of Alberto, where we see the Penguin being smart. He's getting all the blackmail material from the which again is a classic Penguin move. Which again, all per the thing. He's breaking into the safe. He's trying to ransack the kingdom before before the prince takes over. and we have this Rex Calabrese story. I love the Rex Calabrese story because right out the gate it tells us exactly what Penguin wants. He wants the respect, and he wants he basically this Penguin wants the notoriety of comic book Penguin. Essentially, he wants he wants to be like the respectable Iceberg Lounge. He wants to be kind of animated series Penguin to a degree. Like from New Batman Adventures Penguin more accurately. He wants to be.
See, the way I interpreted his story, it was less comic book Penguin, because even thing is like even Penguin was sort of the gentleman mob boss. The way that the mob boss, the Rex Calabrese described in Penguin and Oz's story, it was less that and more in my mind the classic old school gangsters, or even to go back to the references, it's how I would it's how say like Don Vito Corleone.
Yeah, he wants to be Vito in Godfather Part 2 in the flashback. That's what he
Yeah,
wants. No,
yeah.
I get that. I'm just saying that I like that it's kind of, in a sense, it's kind of like best case in terms of the line that made me think animated series Penguin, just kind of traditional comics Penguin, was like when he says parades, like his when Alberto's like throwing in his face like parades in the street and like seeing your face everywhere, which basically in that kind of thing we turned the Penguin into branding, where he kind of turned the whole Penguin gimmick into a brand. I'm not saying we're necessarily going there, but it's like kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a neat way of like through the classic kind of like kind of the mob boss mentality. He wants to be well loved and respected, and he wants like a legitimacy like comic book Penguin, which I think is kind of
Yeah,
But
but it's
you're
not.
right though. It's absolutely
Yeah,
it's kind of like Don Corleone from the like the flashbacks in Godfather Part 2. It's absolutely what he wants.
yeah. I think to the point, it's like with the whole parade thing. I think it's kind of just how for that old school gangster, he was a guy that if you were behind on red, he helped you out or
Hmm.
get you food or like I like Oz in his mind is like if he's a gangster, he's the kind of gangster that in his mind would just bring like turkeys for every family on the street for
Hmm.
Thanksgiving or stuff. But he still had that fear factor. I think in Oz's mind, probably when if you do flashbacks or just have Oz talk about his childhood, he may really ingratiate himself to the gangsters because maybe with his disability or just how he grew up, the gangsters were the gangsters that he interacted with gave him some of the time of day and made him feel like important or special.
Okay,
And I
so
think
that
that's
sorry.
and I think that's something that Oz carries with him, especially as it permeates his relationship with Victor.
Okay, so that brings Colin Farrell has talked about how he's portrayed the Penguin here, and the biggest thing here, or at least I forget if it was the writers specifically Colin Farrell, but who by the way is doing an excellent job in this show.
Mm-hmm.
Goes without saying, but I said it anyway. Regardless, the big way they're portraying the Penguin in terms of how he interacts and what we really see on display here, in terms of like getting to the bottom of him as a character, is he views all of his relationships are transactional. That's essentially that's the key to how he's playing the character here, and that kind of feeds in exactly what you're talking about there, where the whole like like the beloved crime boss and everything, where again it's a very transactional kind of thing where there's respect and there's love, but again it's for it's kind of a give and take sort of thing. He Penguin, he makes a friend in this essentially, but again it's a very transactional kind of a thing here, where again he makes a friend through violence and fear and kind of respect and everything. That's kind of the only way he could make a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And like he has a girlfriend, but again he literally pays her. Well, I mean, like not a girlfriend. The point, he has a friend who happens to be like a prostitute who is like she's that's the thing. But he does, you get a sense that he kind of kind of likes and respects her as well. But again, it's like there's a sadness there with this guy, at least the way he sees himself there, where it's like he would like to have like love and respect and just kind of like human relationships, but being in kind of like the crime drama that he's in, with being in the Gotham underworld, he knows that money has to change hands, or it's kind of a power play sort of thing.
Well, it's also just goes to the point that, like Tony Soprano, both him and Oz are old or middle aged guys that
Yeah.
have very dysfunctional lives,
Hmm.
very dysfunctional views on relationships and people,
Hmm.
and the only way that they can just feel not if not alive, just relevant, is that they have to kind of be gangsters or people that have some level of power. And I think I don't want to skip too far ahead, but I think when we get to the scene where Oz gets to interact with his mom, and
Hmm.
his mom finds out about him killing Alberto and how she reacts to his vulnerability, that I think is very telling and very instructive to how Oz is as a person. You
Yeah.
know,
So then that's the biggest thing this show has going for it here, where the key of the show seems to be how we're visually and conversationally, it's the process of discovery about who this character is and how we learn more about the Penguin. Where I think that visually we see, okay, we had like a brief gag in the Batman where he's strung up and he's kind of waddling like a penguin, but reality we see because we didn't really see him move that much until that point where okay, so he has a leg brace, so that's and the ugly gnarled probably broken foot. I don't know if it's like a birth defect or it's like he probably got broken at a young age and never healed right or something like that. And he's we have like the pictures of his brothers, and we see that he cares about the little things like the air fresheners and the plum car, and he listens to Dolly Parton. Like these are like the things that inform the character, and like all these little things. I think the best thing about this take on the Penguin is that he's very much a kid of the streets of Gotham, where he knows the town. He grew up in this town. That's the thing. It's not like much as there's so many great versions of the Penguin over the years. I mean, one of the great ones in recent years was not recent, but going Arkham City Penguin. But that Penguin was raised in London.
yeah.
That's what I mean. Like, this is kind of a neat, like a very much a classic Penguin of Gotham sort of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so anyway, Vic. So Vic is this is a great. I love the idea of the Penguin kind of mentoring young criminals, which is something we've done occasionally in the comics and other adaptations here and there. Like I think there's been a few side stories in the comics where like I remember I read one. I can't tell you if it was in Detective or the Batman run as like a backup story where the Penguin mentored this. Youth, and it seemed really familiar to me because I think it was a black youth as well, which kind of was coincidental, I think here. But we had just we just got to mentor somebody, and then we have like in the show Gotham, kind of takes on Martine, like like the young mute child in the show Gotham. So I don't know, it just seems to be kind of a recurring thing. Yeah, we'll see if he runs for mayor, but it seems to be a recurring thing.
Yeah, I think those kind of storytelling decisions are done with the Penguin in media, because I think the Penguin, he sort of is an older kind of fellow, so him having a younger guy, it's kind of funny because I think, have you seen the Sylvester Stallone show Tulsa King?
Yes.
So it just kind of like him, like Oz and his relationship with Victor, just kind of reminds me. It wasn't, it's not a 1-to-1, but it kind of just reminds you similar to the relationship that Sylvester Stallone's character Dwayne Manfredi has with his driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think part of it's just that mobster dramas, gangster stories, they're about men and manhood, and the toxic elements of that and how it manifests in organized crime. And so someone like Oz, who is like a hardened criminal to a full extent, has this sort of vulnerability with his relationship with his mother, with his disability, and him taking to someone, even though he was in the middle of committing a crime, like robbing his car. Victor is, for all intents and purposes, a kid, that has a stutter. You feel he's just trying to just survive, and I think Oz, in his way, he's obviously, it's very apparent that he sees a lot of himself in Victor, and then it's kind of sort of, as the show progresses, Oz, I think, is going to be at a crossroads. Like, does he have the opportunity to protect or prevent, Victor? I mean, even though what Victor does at the end, how far can he protect Victor from fully embracing the criminal life and all that entails? Or if Oz, like if he's trying to get to the top, does he have to sacrifice Victor to get what he wants? And I think could be interesting character decisions on the part of Oz. Is that, yeah, he's Tony Soprano, but Tony Soprano, I don't think, well, depending upon when you watch certain parts of the show, didn't go far to really sacrifice people that are really close to him. And I think the fact it takes a shine to Victor, it's going to be really interesting is that on what's the resolution for Victor and Oz's relationship, and how does that resolution impacted, Oz's character in the show and Batman Part 2 and beyond.
I mean, it's a fun duo that we have here. And I just like how, again, the pacing of this thing is great. Where again, it's like everything just kind of falls into each other here. Where again, almost like kind of a cosmic kind of fate sort of thing. While he's trying to move up the ladder, he's always playing small, and he's always kind of like he talks about wanting respect and everything. He then, kind of like intimidates this kid, who's trying to steal his hubcaps. Which, by the way, coincidentally, it's essentially how Batman met Jason Todd.
Yeah, post crisis.
Oh, all right, fine, sure. Post crisis, that's how he met Jason Todd.
No, but I think that's.
Don't be that guy, Rohith. Come on, it's just how he met Jason Todd.
Hey, Hey, I don't want to say you were wrong. I'm just adding more information to your.
Okay.
I'm educating the audience, yo. That's.
All right.
But no, I think it was kind of a neat thing for how Victor is introduced. I think also the fact that he was trying to steal, Penguin's car. There's sort of the thing that like Penguin, he has a really, plumb, nice looking car. And I think there is sort of that like ego thing. Is like, oh, like you're like stealing my ride and all that stuff. And then I think it works also because the evidence of that, crime being the bullet hole then kind of leads to then Sophia key in on like, hey, were you really, not involved with my brother at the night, when he came
and
to
again,
club?
it's kind of him being trigger happy is again the machismo. It's the ego move. It's the whole like the waving around the gun. It's like, and again he shoots Alberto and kind of like in terms of like he's laughing at him, and that's just too much from the take right there, and he shoots him instinctively. These guys are kind of like undermining him, so he's and trying to steal his hubcap, so he's shooting at them.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this: do you think on to some degree he misses intentionally, or do you think he was actually trying to hit him, but he was just was having an off day?
Well, I mean,
Because again, he does he kind of was these kids back in the day.
I can. I don't know if that kind of psychological familiarity can lead one to intentionally miss. I think it's just the fact that realistically, or as realistic as one you and I can ever know about like gunfights or just people shooting, um, you're rarely ever good just pointing a gun, especially and trying to shoot at someone, especially at night.
Yeah.
So I think it's less of Penguin himself like intentionally missing versus that, hey, it's like the heat of the moment. There's just guys, about to steal, and he's just kind of going on instinct. And just because he's going to instinct doesn't necessarily mean he's like trained or he's not dead shot, right? So he's just
No,
gonna.
of course not. No.
Yeah, he was just trying to like.
Ironically, though, the actor played Bullseye, but let's not factor that in right now.
That's a good pull there. Yeah, no, and I just think the way Oz reacted, he's not some, I mean, he's a guy that's wanting to be the head criminal or the head honcho, but he's not, you know, the most skilled gangster. He's not going to be the one that can shoot all the targets or one of the
He's
fastest.
smart, but he's also there's some sloppiness, and as he says later on, there's room to grow. There's a lot of room to grow for him
here. Yeah, I mean, I just think back to that scene where he's like struggling to carry Alberto's body.
He
like,
tosses him down the.
Yeah, no, and like, that's a kind of a charming. It's a funny moment, but it's charming and endearing because Oz is just a guy, right? It's just a guy who has a disability that makes it hard for him to kind of move about. So he has that penguin gait or walk. But at the same time, it's like because of that, he has to kind of be smarter or think ahead, just a few steps of the other guy.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting to see Oz is kind of a guy who thinks fast on his feet, and it's like, oh, this is a guy who will just like get out of a jam once in a while.
And we know he was planning to kill Vic initially, but he needed as a practical it was a practical issue. He needed help to carry the body and dispose of the body. So he basically like, I'll string the kid along and like give him some hope, and it'll help me dispose of the thing, and then I'll kill him in the morning.
Yeah,
But again, I like that along the way, though, and I love it didn't give him. It didn't really make him change his plan, but again, he just the way it works is again kind of love and affection and relationships being a transactional kind of thing here. It's like again, he's I'm not going to kill him, and he's going to help me dispose of this body, at least as far as I'm telling him. And along the way, I'll get him some lunch. I'll get him get him like a sandwich, and I I have a driver, and I have a buddy here, a henchman. It's my first henchman. So he's kind of he's embracing it. He's kind of having a good time. But this kid, knowing that he's gonna be dead by morning anyway, so I might as well enjoy it.
yeah, and I think also part of what's interesting about him and Vic is that Vic is just kind of someone that's just struggling to make by,
Yeah.
and I
Plus, he's
appreciate.
homeless. He's newly homeless because of the Riddler. The Riddler, the seawall thing destroyed his home.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing that I kind of appreciate is that Oz is like, hey, it's not enough to just survive. You got to be more than that. You got to have ambition. You got to thrive. You made it here, and that should count. And so I think Oz, in a way, is kind of just trying to inspire Vic to be more. And I think and I kind of wonder for Oz when he was growing up, did he think that more beyond just like making it, day to day, and that maybe with interacting with the gangsters, there was sort of a role model, something to aspire to, beyond just like, oh, I need to make sure I have like I'm able to get my next meal or have a roof over my head.
No. But again, I love that he does see himself in this kid to some degree, and I just need a chance, and he gives the kid a chance, and he does come through for him by the end.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see. Oh, again, it's also kind of nice that the Penguin, he doesn't seem to doesn't seem as old fashioned as he kind of is, and you even see he's got old fashioned taste too. Like later on with the whole Mame thing.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't judge people. Like again, he respects the working girl. Again he. Well, I mean, a lot of people have pointed this out. I don't think it's really a big deal, but it's kind of nice, I guess. And just feeds in the whole thing. Where I believe we had streetwalkers who were they were, I believe, transgender or something, right?
Yeah.
So I
I,
was
I
saying, like, it's like he's respecting and using the proper terminology and everything. I don't know. It just seems like he's making an effort and everything. So it's the fact that he doesn't judge people in general being lower class, is like in kind of this slum of in kind of the slummy area of Gotham that he grew up at, specifically with Vic and everything, but also just everything else. I don't know.
Yeah, I think part of it is just that, like I said, like Oz is a guy, and I think he's just a guy that will give people respect, but he has sort of grander ambitions. So I think while he's respectful, he can be genuine to a certain extent, but there is, like you said, a transactional aspect. Like how much the way that Penguin acts is just sort of, hey, I'm trying to build this image that people can buy into and lower the vulnerabilities or aid or assist me. And I think that's sort of the thing about Oz is that he can be both just like a guy that can buy your sandwich, shoot the shit with you, and also is trying to pull an angle on you.
And you
And
see the charm in that too, where you see why the Falcons kept this guy around, because he kind of makes them laugh. There's a charm there. He delivers. He gets the business done,
mhm,
and he doesn't really ask for much because again he's playing small to the big fish, so he gets a cut.
yeah, but the thing is that that's a facade that
Mm-hmm.
eventually some people kind of look like see pass through, especially Sal Maroni.
Oh yes, oh God, yes, Sal Maroni. Oh, such a great, again, the wonderful Clancy Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oddly in prison this time instead of like being the guard at the prison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I guess talk about the. Sorry, real quick. I want to mention this, and then we'll talk about the Falcone family a little bit here. So again, I think another great mark of a great character is a character with very relatable or very reasonable desires. Where again, he wants the Rex Calabrese thing, but also Penguin fundamentally he just wants to keep things spinning. Wants to keep things spinning. He definitely has ambition. He wants to move up, but the thing about this primarily. He doesn't want the drops operation to be shut down because obviously that puts a big kink in just anything that he wants, and just kind of he wants to keep business going. Like Tegan and I always kind of talk about, we love the character Howard Hamlin because Howard Hamlin, no matter what, he just wants to keep the lights on at HHM and enjoy his cushy lawyer lifestyle. Again, he doesn't want a lot. He just wants to, he just wants to keep it all spinning. And between the McGill brothers just driving up a wall, that's the thing that that complicates everything for him. So I kind of find that aspect with the Penguin here.
He's a working man's gangster.
Yeah, he's a 9 to 5 gangster.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's kind of what makes, I think that's sort of the neat thing about Oz is that he approaches being a gangster just kind of like a guy that you see on a sitcom approaching his job. Just comes in, just trying to make do and, have whatever fun he can have on the side.
It's time to make the donuts, man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the Falcone family. So again, a lot of great, kind of the Jeff Loeby and like between Year One, Long Halloween, and Dark Victory, we have Johnny Vitti, who of course I always have a great fondness for Johnny Vitti because he led to this amazing climax, especially in the animated film. But regardless, a great climax in Year One with the whole bridge thing with Commissioner Gordon. Well, with Jim Gordon during that scene. Again, everyone always kind of like glaze over Johnny V. While the first victim in Long Halloween, also again, like he's like on the bridge, like holding an infant, trying to jab Gordon with a knife, and it's like it's an insanely tense climax.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Milos Grappa, the big muscle for the Falcone family.
Yeah.
Oh, Michael Kelly playing Johnny Vitti, which I did not expect, because I knew when I heard Johnny Vitti mentioning, oh boy, Johnny Vitti, and like, okay, it's a very svelte Johnny Vitti, but still, good actor.
Yeah, and he also was in The Sopranos.
What was he though?
Michael Kelly, yeah, he plays like an FBI agent.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, because I know he's in House of Cards. It's my main go-to with it. Also, wasn't a DC film. He was in Man of Steel.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. He plays Steve Lombard.
Yeah, plays Steve Lombard, the sports guy. Yeah. Anyway, so Mike Kelly, great actor. Yeah, you're right. Those track, he would have been like one of the FBI guys, like harassing Tony Soprano.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's see. So the point being, they're bossing Penguin around. I love that Penguin, like in showing up to this meeting, he's like telling Vic, okay, this is the way it works. I act small so they feel big, and allows us to work. And we have then we see who's really like in charge now, especially with Berto seemingly missing. It's Sophia Falcone.
The way she enters in from the doors, and that there's like a soft focus. You don't really get to see a good look at her, but the way she comes in is kind of like a horror movie slasher coming in, and the way the two guys the two main guys in the Falcone family just shut up, and Oz doesn't realize it, and then he just kind of just slowly turns his head and then just sees Sophia Falcone there. That is just a well done scene.
Now, I admit, there was, I didn't doubt she wasn't going to do a good job, but it was this thing where, so we have a really good actress with Kristen Milioti.
Yeah.
Milioti. And, of course, loved her in Palm Springs. She's, I also saw her in the Black Mirror, the Star Trek parody Black Mirror episode. I saw her in that, too. So the point being, she's really good. Mm-hmm. I figured she was going to be good, but when we think Sophia Falcone, there's basically three. There's been like really like two versions of her. There's Long Halloween version, which is like the 6 foot tall, kind of hulking, which essentially goes on the Dark Victory and everything. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Gotham version. It's interesting how we kind of splice them together in a sense here. We're gonna have, and I know it's her own take. And it's gonna be very different. That I'm just saying in terms of we had like Sophia Falcone in the Gotham TV show. You had a beautiful Falcone daughter, and she was ultimately more menacing and more bloodthirsty than her father was. which is kind of something we seem to be kind of doing a little bit of here. But then we're also representing kind of the classic comic book stuff with Sophia with the Hangman nod, which I was really like, oh yeah, hey, we're doing the Hangman thing, and I suspect the scarf we might be hanging up like a hang. Like I'm not saying we're going to call it Hangman for the same reasons we do in like Dark Victory, but I suspect either someone tried to hang her, she tried to hang herself in Arkham or something. I think that's why she's wearing the scarf.
Mhm. I think also what really is interesting and so appreciative about her performance here is that she has sort of this smile. It's sort of like a
Mm-hmm.
Cheshire cat smile. And my God, I think props to the hair and makeup people and having Kristen Miali look the way she does. Because in my mind, the way she looks kind of how like certain women would look in like 70s films, especially like gangster. Like for me, the way she looks,
There's a Talia Shire vibe to her, yeah.
yeah, and for me, I kind of the way she acts or her like inflection or tone, she felt like a female version of Michael Corleone, but with a little bit of a like a few screw looses.
It is interesting that you mentioned that. Of course, it's unavoidable. We're going to have some Godfather references within this, and just in general, especially coming off of the long Halloween of it all. But
Mhm.
when they were designing the look of the Penguin, the one of the main things they looked at early on before they added the weight onto the character was they were looking. Mind, I'm going to butcher his last name because I swear to you, I watched like the short documentary they put out on him recently because it was on Peacock, but I'm just gonna go with the mispronunciation. John Cassavetes, the guy who plays Fredo.
Mhm. No, that's a
Last name
correct pronunciation.
what?
The you pronounced his last name correctly.
Oh, hey. Anyway, so point being, he's if you kind of look at him, there's a lot of Fredo there's still a little bit of Fredo in the look of the penguin, which is kind of interesting if you do kind of look at him. Like imagine if like the back of the hair was a little longer, and then you'd have like Dog Day Afternoon Fredo, but it's still like a little John Cassavetes, but still. It's interesting they worked from there and then they kind of like they added all the other stuff on top of that. That was essentially what the bare minimum of the Penguin was. Where like it was going to be kind of like we have Colin Farrell. We give him kind of a Fredo look, and then we just kind of like pile it on from there. The fact there's all this menace and tension between the two, like I knew it was you, Fredo, kind of a thing between them here because the idea is these two were really close, and I think the reading between the lines, I like to think that Penguin he res he respects it. She's essentially got a screw loose, and in terms of like he's got a physical ailment, which she probably did not judge him for or anything, or like maybe was. I'm not saying she was extra nice to him, but I think there was like a mutual respect of some kind between them. But more so, the fact that they are the underestimated members of the the Falcon organization, and they kind of recognize that in each other, and we definitely see that from her this episode that everyone underestimates you, Oz, but not me.
Hmm. But the thing is that it's not sort of a. I think like for Sophia, she's underestimated not because they have like a gender sort of a thing, which is sort of a take you could have done with like a traditional mob family and all that stuff, but more because of her like mental illness, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. Because in this universe, the Batman, it is known in the history for Bruce, like Bruce's mom was committed to Arkham.
Mm-hmm.
And is she in Arkham in this universe as she's in Earth One or no?
That is the darndest thing because I don't think we went the full like Arkham last name on her. I don't think we did. I could be wrong, but I know she like we had the whole we did the Arkham ties thing, but I don't think that her last name was actually Arkham. I don't think we went that far. I'd have to double check though, but I'm pretty sure they did, and otherwise I think more people would be talking about that.
Because I wonder, I thought she was in Arkham because that's like she was committed to Arkham because it's her family. Like they were able to keep it hush hush.
Right.
I
Yeah,
maybe
it's worth looking into, but I have a feeling it's not that.
yeah, but regardless, I think what's interesting is that Sophia and Oz are people defined in a certain way by their disability, or in this case, like Sophia being. generally having some level of mental illness. And I think what's interesting is that for Sophia in the show, at least in the first episode, she is basically her comic book counterpart meets like Alberto Falcone in The Long Halloween with sort of the little bit of madness to her.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of an interesting way of contextualizing this character because she is basically the preeminent heir. I think like the Michael Corleone dynamic, especially is, or Michael Corleone like archetype works especially well for Sophia because then you kind of have Alberto being instead of just his usual comic book self, he's kind of the like Sonny of the family.
Yeah, yeah, he's seen as the washout. He's seen as his weakness in the family, and Alberto's always kind of been that too, or he's always seen it's perceived weakness, but in reality, there's a lot of potential there. Now, mind you, Alberto knows is he's worm food, so it doesn't really.
Well, because Alberto, he's looked at as kind of this bookish, effeminate intellectual that's kind of
Yeah,
weak like as contrast to like I think that's like why Sophia, her being the tall, like broad shouldered, muscly, woman, she's quote unquote more of a man than her brother is, and
yeah,
that's the dynamic. Whereas in this, it's like you have the son who's kind of the like screw up or just addicted to drugs and whatever. But because he's the son, he kind of takes in. Whereas the daughter, even though she's probably a lot more capable than her brother, because she has certain mental illness and not being the prodigal son, she's sidelined. And I think in a way, it's by Falcone killing her brother, he put Sophia in kind of the best place, like in her full potential as sort of the a rival, criminal mob boss. And that's in spite of the fact that like Sophia specifically mentions the fact that her brother visits her every week. So it's not like a dynamic where it's like the siblings resent each other.
yeah. That I really did like that touch. That Alberto. Here's the thing again, Alberto having gone through his own struggles, I think definitely cared about his sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to think she was probably there for him too, like vice versa.
Yeah, and anything kind of funny enough, they're a much more functional or more wholesome family than the Falcone family in the Long Halloween.
True. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So, speaking of familial dynamics, so Penguin's mom. So this is always an interesting runner we have sometimes with Penguin, where we keep his mother around. Like I believe the story was the Greg Hurwitz story, Pain and Prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
and we also have the Carol Kane take on Mrs. Cobblepot in Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting when we kind of have the mother still be around here, and here we have the Mrs. Cobb, I guess. Which, by the way, how do you feel about the whole Cobb versus Cobblepot thing? Yeah,
Considering the background and just the overall vibe of this character, Cobblepot just doesn't feel like if I were to see this guy on the street, like Cobblepot just seems like such a weird last name to have. It doesn't match like with the guy that I see in front of him.
I mean, look, I understand that there's a practical. Yes, it's practical and it makes sense, but still, it's like it just feels like okay. Look, we go from Oz to Oswald. That would fit like a glove. It just feels like Cobblepot, then shortened to Cobb. Like he's short. Like can't we just still say like the full name is Cobblepot? But
I mean,
you're
Riddler.
not. Look, you're not wrong. I'm just saying it's like the fanboy in me. It's like, come on, Cobblepot sounds cooler though.
Riddler's real name in the Batman is Edward Nashton, not Edward Nigma.
But
So
that was from the comic though.
I mean, yeah, but it's like the thing is that Reeve specifically is taking Batman in a grounded element, and
Yeah.
you could argue that the Batman and the Penguin are really more realistic than the Nolan trilogy, especially in Batman Begins. Like think of it this way: the the third act of Batman Begins has a fictional device that takes water and vaporizes it, and because the water is infected with like a hallucinogen to
Hmm.
make everyone go wild. Whereas the third act of the Batman is just a guy blowing up like cellars and causing flooding to come in, and there's like a terrorist attack in a stadium.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Look, the mic. Fear gas notwithstanding, fear toxin notwithstanding. The microwave in there was it's actually based on something though.
It is not. What thing is it based on?
No, seriously, like there was like a thing where it's like the enemy's water. There's something about like doing something to like an enemy's water supply. I'm not saying it was actually done or finished. I'm saying it was like a theoretical thing that was explored
Yeah, but
once.
like, okay, let me kind of break down the logic of that though, because okay, how do you do something to a water supply without impacting the literal 70% of water that's in all human beings' bodies?
Well, I don't mean it's gonna like actually put them through do
No,
like
no,
a
no. But I'm
microwave
just
thing on them.
no, no. But that's the thing. It's just like, oh, we have this like unique device, and like our and the like the Batmobile is like this big, huge like military tank that's like somehow mobile. And whereas the Batman, it's like he has a squirrel suit, and his car is literally a souped up muscle car.
Look, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, let's give the microwave mirror just a little bit of credit, at least in terms of like it's a jumping off point. I'm saying at least Nolan's technology is like, okay, there's a feasibility there. Just it is a little heightened, but that I think Nolan struck a balance. That's all I'm saying. He struck a balance between the comic book logic and he grounded the comic book logic. Well, you're right. Then we're going very practical with Matt Reeves Batman.
Mhm.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I also think another thing that might be a factor is that there's also the theory that like because Disney owns the TV rights for Batman, that for any sort of TV version of Batman or Batman adjacent characters, it has to be radically different or contextualized, so it can't necessarily be one to one. So it's like, oh, it's not using Oswald Cobblepot, it's Oz Cobb, so it doesn't have to like you have to pay Disney whatever right. I don't know.
That's not true at all. Come on, no, that's not.
I mean, think of the like past like think of all the Batman related TV shows that don't
Well,
have that.
again, that's okay. Here's the thing. Okay, I know I understand where you're getting at there. Okay, because there's like two things Batman's always contending with in TV shows. Okay, because one, you're right. There is the whole stupid thing of like for some reason we can't have Batman in a Batman TV show. I think because of the whole '66 thing.
Mhm.
However, the precedent being we have, this is a continuation of the movie, and we've already pre-established, Oswald Cobblepot. However, I know we haven't said the name, but just the fact that like, we have this character there, I don't think we can necessarily say we can't carry over that name. That's where I'm.
No, because he didn't introduce himself as he just called himself Oz.
I know he called
Which
himself Oz. I'm just saying it's like it feels like in a movie they can get away with it. If they can get away with the movie of the same, it's in the same universe and everything. Why couldn't they carry that over?
because TV rights are a distinct category from film rights, right?
Well, okay. See, when you bring that up, it then makes me realize like, oh yeah, and Batman is not in this show. So
Yeah,
God,
because it's
you.
like
I,
considering
I,
the
I might
way.
have to redact what I just said. You might actually have a point there. Darn
Yeah.
it. Well, okay. I look at. I don't mean to linger on the Cobb. I want to say this, okay? As far as all the other things he could have done, in terms of shortening it to Cobb, at least part of the name is represented. I want to give him points on that because some people are really overblowing the whole Cobblepot thing. I like Cobblepot clearly because I think Cobblepot's a cool sounding name. It's part of the character, and just but of all the things you could have changed to, at least it's close. At least it's like Patrick versus Rick sort of thing. My name's not Rick. That kind of thing.
And also, like Cobb is an actual last name. Like there's like Inception.
I
John's
know
name.
that was my first thought. Like,
Yeah.
oh, so okay, I just want to address I just wanted to address the Cobb thing. Period. Because people are going to say, "What do you think about the Cobb name?" Well, there you go. Anyway, so his mother there, but yeah, the whole transaction relationship thing. It does very much feel like she wanted to get his mother's love. He wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to not be held back. He didn't want weakness.
Mhm.
And the way it's kind of worked years later is that his mother's in a position of weakness with her mental state, but still he does want that respect from her. He does want that love in a non-transactional way, and he's not quite getting it. 'Cause she still wants more from him. She still wants like, hey, admit that you did this because you wanted to, which is like I love that she's very on his side with the criminality. That's great.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like the way she raises, the way she interacts with Oz. She's like she is kind of, she's one of she's one of she's one of the examples in fiction of a mom that just enables the worst aspects of her young boy. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was flashbacks or if Oz tells a story, and the way that the mom raised the kids, it's
Yeah,
clear that the mom played favorites and that she favored the probably an older brother that was more the masculine,
yeah.
go-getter guy, and Oz was like maybe the more weak, quiet guy, and that's probably something that he's internalized and had to kind of just outwardly be this macho tough guy or big shot because he in his mind, if he gets all this, he can get the love of his mom.
Yeah, I admit I am really interested to see this whole how this whole brother thing goes. The fact that he had brothers is a new kind of facet to the character, which I don't think he's ever had brothers before. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we play that out.
Hmm.
Or anyway, so the point being, like he's thinking about skipping town. The Falcons are kind of like on his scent, and she kind of inspires him, like, no, own this, like work with this. So we visit Sal Maroni in prison, and we have this great payoff here. We kind of set up the fact that Carmine had Sal Maroni's ring as kind of like a screw you. I took over your empire. Like I beat you and put you in prison. So I'm gonna wear your ring, kind of a thing. And of course, he snagged this off Alberto's body, and he basically kind of after Moroni calls out the Penguins playbook, he's a little impressed by him at the end. Like, how did you get this? It's just maybe there's more to me than you think.
Yeah, and that I think that was such a great response from Oz because as much as he's trying to be like the small fry and blend in, there's a part of him that wants more, and I think that's both a sense of protection and a sense of being stifled with his persona. And I think that's something that the Penguin I think does a really good job about in this episode, and is the idea of persona, is that the public your front facing identity and the identity you have just in your private intimate moments. And I think like it does such a fine, it treads that fine line, especially with a character like Oz, who is all about presenting, how can he make himself be what people think he is to and utilize that to his advantage.
Yeah. Okay, real quick, I just want to just get this in here somewhere. Guess anime fan. I love seeing Penguin back in purple. Yeah, Batman's wardrobe has been pretty good,
Mhm.
in this show, and also when we kind of dress him up for the club, he's wearing like purples and whites and everything. Like this is classic Penguin.
Yeah, I think it kind of works because like purple, it's a color associated with royalty and
Mm-hmm.
like richness. So
The
it
color of kings.
yeah, yeah, and I think that kind of works for like Oz. I think there's sort of a certain stereotype or certain trope in gangster stories and whatnot of a gangster wanting to be seen as legit or like classy or a man of luxury, and having things with the purple color on him is in a way trying to put on this like luxurious, elegant style to him.
Yeah. All right, so we have a really cool car chase in this.
Hmm.
Yep, very well directed. And I love the fact he had a very clever escape, or at least almost escape. Where he kind of hid in the trunk.
Yeah.
All right, so then so the penguin gets caught, and then we have this very hauntingly dark torture scene, which basically sets the tone for how dark we can get in this show. Which again is I love that it's like we live in such a desensitized culture these days, where it's like how and especially in the comic book stuff now, is post boys era. It's like violence. I do fear we are becoming a little numb to violence post the boys because we're kind of seeing everything now.
I mean, I feel like violence has been pretty far for the course in like popular entertainment since like what, the 70s, 80s.
Well, that's the thing. Is at a certain point, it's not that we haven't had extreme things of violence, Rohit. It's just the fact that now it's become more and more commonplace. Where that's
I
the thing.
mean,
Where like PG-13 is like now. I think I'm saying R has become the new PG-13. I'm almost at that point these days.
I don't know. I mean, think of it this way: in the '80s, like freaking RoboCop got
Hmm.
got crucified, and that was a
Yeah.
movie that had like toys marketed for kids. Like I just like,
That was the '80s though. That doesn't
what do you
count.
mean that was the '80s? That's like I feel like what happened in the '80s is probably.
They made the kid friendly cartoons out of all the horror all the
For the
horrible R
kid, but
rated.
like there are plenty of stories of people my age and not older that watched like things like Terminator and RoboCop, and they turn out fine. Like
No,
I think
I'm not worried about that kind of thing. I'm worried about just in terms of like how we're. I'm sorry, I'm not worried like culturally where we're going there. I'm just worried the fact of like what are we're gonna run out of ideas. Kind of worried. It's like we're doing all the dark. We how do we step it up? Kind of thing. How do we show like we're if R becomes the new PG-13, what ungodly things do we have to do to kind of really
I
you
don't
know
know if R is the new PG-13. I think
I don't know. It's like
think
I was saying,
legally
everyone's cursing more and more nowadays. It's like half the R rating now. It's like
like,
in fact it has it's excessive cursing, but really that feels like it's practically PG-13 now.
I have no idea. I can't. I don't see that in any part. Like I'm trying to struggle with like any examples of like where stuff in PG-13 movies is like much more rougher than what it was like 10 or 15 years ago. I think it's pretty much like I mean I think the Batman is like as one of the Batman is like one of the more mature Batman movies. So it's probably not appropriate for someone like 10 to 12, probably like 13, obviously PG-13. And I think the Penguin, it's an HBO show, so it'd be kind of weird if it kind of hold back on its level of violence. But I don't know, like, what is it just because here's the thing, it's like its violence is not as crazy as like what you see on like Invincible or The Boys. So is it just the fact that like in that scene, it's like it's a very realistic display of violence? So that's probably
No, I
where.
Right, I'm saying I don't have a problem with anything we do with the violence here in the Penguin. I'm just saying I'm impressed that we're able to do this. I'm just saying collectively, I'm worried that in other
Oh,
all the
I
other stuff, it's like I'm impressed that we're stepping it up in a way here. I'm just saying, broadly, it's like we need like inventive ways of doing it like this. Otherwise, it's going to get stale because the boys is so popular and like it's and we're doing more and more of this stuff and everything else. And because in the advent of streaming, it's like the TVMA is practically PG-13 now because it's everywhere.
Okay, I see what you mean.
That's essentially what I'm getting. I don't have a problem with the way with like the thing itself. I'm just saying because we're oversaturating everything with it. It's kind of becoming the new PG-13 because it's so readily available. Where it wasn't as.
I see. That's a good point because it's just like, how far do you go?
So I mean that makes me wonder, like if we're starting here, I mean it's promised to kind of get darker as it goes on. I'm not saying they're not going to impress us or like like disturb us with where they're going from here, but it's like wow, it's like yeah, this was something I haven't really seen before. This was really dark the way we're interrogating the penguin.
I guess like for me, it's I never really got to that place because with the fact that the way the Penguin is structured as a TV show, like it's specifically it's a crime drama, it's a mobster show.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, like that's like seeing how Oz was tortured. It wouldn't like I wouldn't find it out of place in something like The Sopranos or Boardwalk Empire or whatnot. So I think, but I guess like it's like okay, I can see your point. Is like okay, like if they go this far, like how far do you go to just not feel kind of just not contrived, but just stuck in your way or like the shock value is kind of lost. But I don't know if there's any. I think it's less of like, all right, how messed up you can get with the violence. It's just more about the context in which said violence can be a little bit more charged or more tense, especially if, say, maybe if it's not Oz that's being tortured, it's maybe Vic or his mom. Like, so I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's as the show progresses, it's not like the violence gets more intense in terms of the actual like act itself. It's more about the circumstances surrounding why is the violence being inflicted on said character and who said violence is being inflicted upon.
Mm. Yeah, but the tension was very integral to kind of like what really sold the scene here. Where it's less. Think about this: before we really did the torturing, it was like psychologically, the penguin he's stripped bare, including like she's holding the leg brace, which is like his the representation of his inadequacy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's basically saying this is what they did to us in Arkham. When they're in the intake process or something along these lines. They did this to us every morning. I think she might have said,
Yeah.
which is horrible. And basically, just kind of like the thing about it, we're like sticking a gun in his mouth, and then we're also like saying, "Oh, have this is all based on like what this one kid said." She just kills this, kills one of Vic's buddies, one of the rapscallions who was stealing his hubcaps.
Mm-hmm.
Just to say, see, you got what you wanted. You talked your way out of it. How do you feel? Just like just killing the kid so nonchalantly, and he doesn't care, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's there's so much tension there, and we see. I love that bullet hole, as you said earlier. It was the undoing here. It put him in this position, and it's the tension of like he was frantically calling Vic, and you're wondering how the heck is Vic going to get him out of this, or is he going to intact? And then we pull out the razor wire, the very sharp piano wire, and he's basically his the threat of his arm being no. I have a whole hang about limb removal, so this is like oh god, they're trying to saw his arm off, dear God.
Mm-hmm.
So and this whole plan with the car was just great. Just the idea of okay, we're gonna set up essentially set up a mob war, which is great.
Yeah, and it's kind of an ingenious plan. The more when I thought of it, it's because it's like Oz. The way this plan works out for Oz is that he's just keenly aware of the psychology and the social dynamics of the mob families.
Yeah.
Because Maroni, he specifically has a very specific axe to grind against Carmine because Carmine, let him out to dry, and he's in jail because of it. And so I think the fact that like, oh, people see Samurai with his ring, two and two together, and the thing is, the Moroni family can't say no because nobody will believe them. And two, there is a part of it. It's like, hey, if people perceive us as fighting back, even though we didn't have the means to fight back, that gets people to respect us and gives us power.
Mm-hmm.
More power for us, less power for Falcone. And I think for Oz, it's probably the long plan is just that he's just basically manipulating these two families to basically kill each other off, and then Oz is just there to pick up the pieces.
Which, in a sense, again, the fundamental idea of Long Halloween is like the freaks are kind of rising during the mob conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of like again how he's kind of raising the prominence and all of this kind of by proxy of like what the Riddler did, and then of course I love Penguin's like opinion on like Madman. Like he doesn't like that. Again, Penguin does value the city, so he doesn't like the fact that Riddler like, destroyed the territory. Like Penguin's all about the people going up against each other, not like don't destroy the history of the place.
Yeah. If we were to do the moral alignments from D&D, it's like Penguin is like lawful evil, whereas Riddler is like chaotic evil.
Yeah. Anyway, so everything works out, and then we have this throwaway line of like about slush puppies, and we have Penguin and Vic getting slush puppies, which is delightful.
Yeah.
I love the slush puppies thing. I thought it was a great way that's where like oh my god, it's such a great first episode. We even paid off the slush puppies in episode 1.
Yeah, and it goes back to the whole thing that Oz is just a guy that he grew up mixing all the slushies together and is just drinking out with this kid,
which is called the suicide slush.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's which again is kind of it's a dangerous gamble.
Yeah, but not only is it a gamble, it's a 9 to 5 and a circuit breaker. And I really appreciate the song coming back at the end because like Oz is just hustling. This is a job for, and the thing is, it kind of works thematically because it says for anyone that hasn't watched 9 to 5, the movie is all about these three women that manipulate or put on some machinations to get rid of their boss, and then become sort of the new heads of the company or the new bosses, and that it kind of it inadvertently like Oz is basically what Dolly Parton
Absolutely.
Lily Tomlinson and Jane Fonda. So that it's kind of a I didn't now I just thought of that comparison. So it works in that way.
Yeah. So yeah, again, just a very succinct, very a lot of ground covered. It was a very insanely solid pilot. I felt, and I'm very much I'm sold on wherever it's going to go from here. I think Matt Reeves, he's keeping us occupied while he's taking his sweet time making the Batman too.
Hopefully turns out to be as good, if not better, than the Batman. So
Yeah, well, at the very least, hopefully, Bruce Wayne will be better.
man, now, just gonna be texting Matt Reeves. Is like, hey, make him more emo, and he's gonna start playing My Chemical Romance.
God. Anyway, so let's go through and thank the folks for tuning in. We had Kogi Anime Fan, we had Little Blue, and we had Slasher Fred.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, folks. And again, I can't promise a regular day because we're having some scheduling issues a bit lately. But we will be. We're going to try and cover them. Before the next one comes out. After once they come out. So that's it's kind of what we're working with right now immediately. But we're going to try covering them week to week as much as we can. So yeah, tune in for episode 2. All right, and that's it. Remember, folks, working 9 to 5.